We are now reaching the end of the topic of inheritance, and this brings us to pedigree charts, okay? This is a very interesting and important topic, okay? And in order for this to make as much sense as possible, I quickly got to revise something with you, okay? So here we have Michael Phelps, right? An Olympian, okay? Olympian swimmer. And we look at his cells and we look even closer into his nucleus, where we can find DNA, right? His DNA is stored in the form of all these chromosomes. As a human, he has 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? And each pair has one chromosome inherited from the mom and one chromosome inherited from the dad, right? Real simple. Now, there are two key words you need to know: autosomes and sex chromosomes. So basically, autosomes is the name we give to all of the chromosomes from pair 1 to pair 22, okay? They are autosomes. Pair 1, pair 2, all the way to pair 22, they are autosomes. Sex chromosomes is the name we give to this last and final pair, okay? Because this last one determines your sex, whether you are male or female. Now, if we look a bit closer, so we zoom into one of these chromosome pairs, we can see it has all these lines, all these bands, okay? These are all a different location on the chromosome, and they each code for a different trait or a different gene, okay? And we can see that our parents both have that gene, but they may have a different variation of that gene. Your mom might be tall and your dad may be short, and so they will each pass on a different variation of this gene, okay? And so depending what you have inherited from your parents, and depending on the strength of this particular gene that you inherited, that will determine the outcome or the trait that you have, okay? So this gives us enough now. Now we can go to pedigree charts. So what is a pedigree chart? This, my friend, is a pedigree chart, okay? And a pedigree chart is basically a little diagram that shows you the pattern of inheritance of a specific trait or a specific disease, okay? So let me clearly explain. So right here, we can see these letters, 1, 2, and 3. 1 represents the parent generation. 2 represents the children generation. 3 represents the grandchildren generation, okay? What is a square? A square represents male. A circle represents female. This line connecting the male and the female represents marriage, okay? They are married. And this line downward indicates kids. They're kids, so they have 3 kids, and they are all daughters. The one daughter, daughter 3, has a kid with another person, another male. Okay, they get married and they have kids. So they have 3 kids, a male, female, and male. Now, what is this? So these numbers, they don't really mean anything. It's just person 1 and person 2 in generation 1, person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4 in generation 2, okay? Now, last thing, what does it mean if it's filled in with black and just filled in with white? So when it's filled in with black, it indicates that this person has the specific trait that we're talking about, or has the specific disease we are talking about. So in the case of this one here, we can see the father has the specific trait or disease, and the mother also has the specific trait or disease. One of their daughters, only one, also has the disease. And then that daughter, one of her kids also has the disease, okay? So that's the basics of what a pedigree chart is, okay? Now, your job as a student is to be able to tell me or tell the teacher or tell the test what type of inheritance this is. What is it representing? What type of inheritance? So what do you mean, what type of inheritance? So you learned, or you need to know, about 3 types of inheritance: autosomal dominant inheritance, autosomal recessive inheritance, and X-linked inheritance. So I made a video on each of these, so if you don't know anything about this, I really recommend you find out what it is through some way, okay? Now, real quick, autosomal dominant. We know this is a type of inheritance where if you have, if your alleles, so your alleles for a specific trait, if they are both dominant or only one of them is dominant, then you will have that specific trait. So for example, the ability to roll your tongue or make a U shape with your tongue is autosomal dominant inherited. your ear being free, the ear lobe being free compared to attached is also autosomal dominant. And having a widow's peak with hair, so having this kind of shape of hair, many people have it, is also autosomal dominant. Okay? So all of these, and there are way many more conditions. I'm just mentioning 3 interesting ones, okay? So if you have both of your alleles dominant at this specific gene, then you will have the ability to roll your tongue, to have a free earlobe, and to have your hair shape like this, okay? If you have both recessive, then you're going to have these. You can't do it, you'll have an attached ear, and you'll have this kind of hair, okay? Hairline. Now, let's move on to the next one, autosomal recessive. So autosomal recessive is when the only way you can have this characteristic is if both of your alleles, so let's take a different place, let's say this one, if both of your alleles are recessive. So both your mom and your dad gave you a recessive gene. And then if you have these, then you'll be able to bend your thumb like this, okay? They call it the hitchhiker's thumb, okay? Whereas if you don't, if you have the dominant and recessive allele or both dominant alleles, then you will have a straight thumb, okay? So that's just one interesting example. Again, there are many, many, many other ones. And again, very important to emphasize here, autosomal. This means that this gene is located where? On any chromosome here, except this last pair, except the sex chromosomes. Okay, this brings us to the last one, X-linked recessive. So both of these are diseases. So the first one is red-green color blindness. So you can inherit red-green color blindness on your X chromosome if you have both of your alleles recessive if you're female. So because a female has 2 X chromosomes, right? So if both of her alleles are recessive, let's say it's this yellow one, if both of them are recessive, she will be red-green colorblind. But a male only has 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome. And since the Y chromosome is completely different from the X chromosome, he only needs 1 recessive allele to be able to be red-green colorblind. That's why males are so much more likely to be red-green colorblind. Around 1 in 12 males are red-green colorblind. For example, me, I am. So I cannot see any letter here. Maybe you can't either. Maybe you also have this specific genetic condition. But if you can, just write down in the comments what letter is here, because I cannot see it. Now, another one is hemophilia. So the ability to keep bleeding without clotting. So you're bleeding continuously and you won't stop bleeding. That's hemophilia. That's also a disease linked to one of the X chromosomes. Okay, so this is all the 3 you need to know. Bear in mind there are more, but for the IB, you only need to care about these 3, okay? So let's get back to that pedigree chart that we started. So like I said, your job is to tell me which type of inheritance this is. But I am going to reveal what it is and explain how I know what that is. But just know for your test, you need to use these tips I'm going to give you to be able to know which type of inheritance it is. So this pedigree here represents an autosomal dominant inheritance. Autosomal dominant, okay? This means that, for example, which trait are we going to pick? Let's pick the tongue one because it's an autosomal dominant. This means, so T for tongue, we'll assign the letter T, okay? T. So to be able to roll your tongue, you need your alleles to be either dominant and dominant or dominant and recessive, because we know when you have dominant and recessive, if the dominant one is there, it will mask or overpower the recessive one and you will still have the trait, okay? So what is special about a pedigree chart of an autosomal dominant inheritance? Okay, let me say. Thing 1 is this. How do we know it's autosomal dominant? We'll go take it one by one. There are 3 ways you can know. One of the parents must have the trait. Okay, so we can see here, both the parents have the trait and one of the kids have it. One of the parents have the trait and one of the kids have it. So this is one clue to know it's autosomal dominant. One clue. Because in autosomal recessive, it is possible for both parents to not have the disease, but one of the kids could have it. But in autosomal dominant, one of the parents must have the disease, okay? One of the parents must have the disease. Okay, to make things a bit clearer, I'm quickly gonna reveal the genotypes of all these people, okay? But no, you should be able to figure them out on your test, okay? So I'm just going to quickly reveal them. Okay, so we just covered one. One of the parents must have the trait. Why does this make sense? Because if one of the parents have the trait, that means they have the ability to pass on a dominant one. And as soon as a dominant one is passed on, then one of the kids can have it, okay? But if both of the parents don't have it, so both of the parents are, for example, small t, then there's no way the kids will have a big T. And so the kids, it's impossible for the kids to have the specific trait, okay? So therefore, one of the parents must have the trait. It's a must. Otherwise, it can't be autosomal dominant. What's next? If both parents have the condition, the kids won't always have the condition. So we can see here. Oh, this is also a key thing. Using a pedigree chart, you won't always be able to figure out the exact genotype, but you can guess. You can get to a point where it's either one of these. So I tried to solve this pedigree chart, and I came to the point where these two, you cannot be sure what they are. So I put a slash because they have to be either of these two. Okay, so coming back to this. If both parents have the condition, the kids won't always have the condition. Because, why does this make sense? So it is possible that this parent here has big T, small t, and they have the condition. And it's also possible for this parent here to have big T, small t, and have the condition. Now, their kids, therefore, it's a possibility that this parent passes on a small t, and this parent passes on a small t. And therefore, their kid may not have the condition, right? So that's very important. It doesn't mean that both parents have it, that the kid will have it, okay? On the contrary, for autosomal recessive, if both parents have it, all the kids will have it. Because in autosomal recessive, both parents have small t, small t, small t, small t. So no matter what combination we give, all the kids will have the disease, right? So that's very important. That's one very important difference between autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive. Okay, there's one more, I think. One more important way to distinguish. It will be present in every generation. It cannot skip generation. Okay, so for autosomal dominant traits, there must be one person in every generation to have it. And that makes sense because if one generation doesn't have it, there's no way that the next generation can have it because you always need a dominant one to be able to pass it on, okay? So you can see here, every generation have it. Generation 1, Generation 2, and Generation 3, okay? That's key. Okay, so that's how you determine, this is how you're able to tell that it's autosomal dominant, okay? Now, let's move on to the next one, autosomal recessive. So this will be a different trait. So we're gonna use now this trait, the finger one, okay? So I call it F. So to be able to have that bent thumb, you must have small f, okay? Small f. So how can we tell that this is autosomal recessive? Okay, let me see. If both parents have the trait, then the kids will have it. Remember, we just said over here that if both parents have it, the kids don't necessarily have to have it because the parents could have a small t and a small t and they pass it on, and the kid has both small t's and so they don't have it, right? But in autosomal recessive, if both parents have it, so for example here we can see both these parents have it, then there's no way their kid cannot have it, okay? Because they only have recessive alleles to pass on. So that's key. That's the first one. That's very important. Next one. Kids can have it even if both parents don't have it, since parents can be heterozygous. So I'm saying that it's possible for a kid to have it even though both parents don't have it. On the contrary, for here, it's impossible. For a kid to have it, a parent must have it. It's impossible for a kid to have it when a parent doesn't have it, okay? But on this one, it's possible. Because, why? Because the parents could be heterozygous. This means they have one dominant, one recessive, one dominant, one recessive. Because since this is autosomal recessive, the only way they can have the disease is if they have both both recessives. So this means it's possible that the parents can be heterozygous. And this means they could each pass on the small f, and this can make their kid have the disease. So that's another important one, okay? I think there may be one more, maybe not. Yes, there's one more. Generations can be skipped. So remember, for dominant, we said it's impossible for generations to be skipped. Every generation, one person will have the disease. For this one, you can skip generations, okay? For example, we can see here, this generation didn't have it, yet this generation did, and this generation did. For autosomal dominant, that's impossible. But for autosomal recessive, it is. And again, the reason is because the parents could be heterozygous, and so they may not have it, but their kids could have it. Okay, cool, that's it. So we're getting to the last one now, X-linked recessive, okay? X-linked. So this means you have the disease if you have, if you're female, both your X chromosomes will have the recessive trait, okay? If you're a male, only one needs to have the recessive trait because you only have one X chromosome, okay? Now, so let's take a condition. Let's pretend we are talking about hemophilia. So we have H for hemophilia. So we write X because it's linked to the X chromosome, okay? This makes it clear for the person looking at the pedigree chart to know what it is. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm quickly gonna reveal this because you can try and solve this thing by yourself. It's kind of like a puzzle. You can try and solve it. But also know that you won't always be able to find the exact thing because sometimes it's possible to be two things, okay? Okay, let's come back. So let's look at how to know it is sex-linked. So for a girl to get the trait, the dad must have the trait. Let's see. So let's see. If a girl has the trait, where are we going? Wait a second. Girl. Yeah, see? So the girl doesn't have the trait, and that's because the dad doesn't have the trait. The girl here doesn't have the trait, and that's because the dad doesn't have the trait. But here, the dad has the trait and the girl has the trait. Why is this? This is because if a dad has the disease, it means this is his genotype. He has XHY. Now, we know that if the mom has it, she has to be XHXH, right? Like this. Now, we know the mom will pass one X chromosome on and the dad will pass one X chromosome on. And since the dad only has one X chromosome to pass on, and in this case, he has the disease because he has the recessive one, automatically he will pass this one on. And so if the mom also has one, then the daughter will be. So the only way for a girl to have the trait is if the dad has the trait, okay? Do you understand this? Now, what about the next one? If the mom has the trait, the son will get the trait. Okay, so we know the son can only have one X chromosome, right? And we know he gets that X chromosome from the mom, okay? Because he's gonna get the Y chromosome from the dad. So let's look at these boys. So he's gonna get the Y chromosome from dad, and if the mom has the disease, he will get the disease, okay? So same here. So for example, the mom doesn't necessarily have to have the disease. The mom can be a carrier, okay? So for example here, the mom is a carrier. She only has one recessive allele, but because the kid is going to get the Y allele from the dad, there's a 50-50 chance he could get the recessive allele from the mom and then have the disease, okay? So that's another thing that's important. Okay, last one. Males more commonly have the trait. So we can see here, out of everyone who has it, there's 5 males and only 3 females that have it. So in X-linked genes, because the male is more likely to get it, you may see, if you look at a pedigree chart, more often males being affected, okay? So these are the 3 key things you need to look at. And it makes it, each of these, if you look at each of these things to see how you can see what it is, if you pay attention to these and you look at this pedigree chart, 100% you should be able to figure out which one it is. But because I taught you in this video, so I didn't give you the opportunity to try and solve it, I will make another video where I make up some pedigree charts and test you to see if you can solve for it using these methods. And that will be able to, after that, you should be able to know if you really understand it or not. So I hope this video was useful, and it's a very important topic, and you'll probably see it a lot if you become a doctor or anything related in the health industry.